Hello everyone. Um, I am still working on different tutorials. This one is a rookie tutorial that maybe intermediate players can also enjoy, I think. It's about assaults in bold action. Let's go. Right. So, rookie tutorial, assaults in bold action. As per usual, the caveats are this is all just competitive bold action, and this is just how I view it, how I've sort of learned to deal with and learn to do assaults, what they can and cannot do. I think I'm fairly good at this. I think I am one of the premier assault army players in the world. Um, I mean, uh, the last three WTCs, I've been placed in the top five at each one of them. I have been the Danish national champion. I've won tournaments. So I sort of I know this, and I quite often play assault armies. I really like the decisiveness that it brings. So I think I am qualified to speak on this topic, ish. So, but if you disagree, that's perfectly fine. There are points in all of my tutorials that are up for interpretation, and I am not a very mathematical bold action player. I'm not like a very precise one for some of the stuff that I do. So a lot of it is just my sort of sense of where it goes. Anyways, here we go. If you want to listen, here it is. So, how does the assault works? This is the basic. This is for rookies, right? You start by declaring the assault, saying this group that I have here, they want to charge that group. You have to be able to see the group that you're assaulting, otherwise you can't declare the charge. Then the target gets to react. If you are outside of 6 inches, they can do defensive fire if they can see you, and so they shoot. And if they can't see you, you can't charge them. So yes, of course they can do defensive fire. Brain fart. Sorry. And then you measure the assault. But only then, once the target has declared their reaction, then you measure the assault. If you are outside of range, the target still gets to do their reaction. So this is one of the points where you're going to have to get down model's eye view, view across the table. Can my guys see the ones that they are assaulting? And only then do you get out the measuring tape and go, right, are they within 12 inches, whatever. Um, Now, that measure is always taken from the closest of your models to the closest of the enemy models. And if that measure, like that, closest to closest, is not a direct line, a direct unobstructed line, then you get to fight simultaneously because the enemy are ready for you. But if that one line between those two models is a direct unobstructed line, then the assaulters fight first. Now, when I say unobstructed, I mean terrain, right? If there's terrain in that line between the closest model and the closest enemy model, then you have to fight simultaneously. So that is it. Um, a lot of people are a little bit confused about the simultaneous rules, and that is especially true for area terrain. Not the topic of this video, but there are a lot of confusion. There's also the confusion of linear obstacles like walls and stuff. But the rules say that if that one measure from closest to closest is a straight line, then you're not fighting simultaneously. All other things don't matter. So then you move the closest model the shortest possible distance, so the straight route. And then if they reach the enemy unit, all your models move up. And at that point, you've decided whether or not your charge goes through terrain, so you check for simultaneous combat. After that, you roll off, Um, the assaulters always fight first, unless it's simultaneous, which means that they pick up one dice per model, roll them, and you kill the enemy models. It's a 3+ to kill an NX, like when you're shooting, 4+ to kill a reg, 5+ to kill a veteran, and that's it. So then, if you have any tough fighters, they get to re-roll any hits they have. So you have to roll like SMGs on sergeants separately, because if they hit, they get to roll again. So tough fighters are really good in close combat. Um, that's one of the bases, that if you want a real assaulty unit, you have to have some top fighters in it. Then you remove all the models that have been killed, and it doesn't matter who does that. Typically, it will be the owning player who just removes them, but it's not really that important. Then, if there are any defenders left, then the defenders get to fight back. And once they have killed whatever they kill, then you count up how many did I kill, how many did my opponent kill. The one who killed most wins the combat and annihilates the opposing force. So all the enemies are removed unless they have the fanatic special rule. If they are fanatics, they will continue fighting. So you have to find another round. If you have a draw, then you start over again, point number one, and fight again. But this time you fight simultaneously. So, because now you're already engaged in melee and everyone is fighting. So, getting a draw is, of course, better than losing the combat round, but it's not ideal, right? Because everyone gets to die a little bit more. Once the fight has been decided and one group is the winner then consolidates. Typically for infantry, that would be a d6, right? And you move that. That is the melee process. That's the close combat process. So that was for all the rookies. Now, how to think about this, what to do, and maybe specifically. Oh, before I get to that, again, when do you fight simultaneously? So, if the line crosses terrain, we've already been over this. If it's not straight, if you have to bend around stuff, you can still see, but in order to get there, you have to go around like impossible terrain or a vehicle or whatever. Then it's not straight line, then you fight simultaneously. Or if the defenders are defending a house or a linear obstacle, so they are up against a linear obstacle, you can just measure to the linear obstacle to the house and then fight. But then they are defending something. So that is simultaneous fights. And of course, if you have a draw in the first round, you fight again simultaneously. Right. So, how to think about this? What is good for assaults? What is not good? The first thing I'll say is there are certain units that are designed for this aspect of bolt action, and not a lot of them. For and this is the list more or less. We have Gurkhas, which are perfect. They are perhaps the best close combat unit of the game, with the exception of the next one on the list. And they are that because they have tough fighter, and at the same time they have the ability to shut down half of the enemy's attacks back. So you can be pretty certain that Gurkhas will win a close combat. The next best unit, or possibly the best, they're really deadly, but they are a bit of a glass cannon, is the Polish Lancers. And they are so amazing because they get 2 attacks, 2 dice per mini. Instead of just 1 for everyone else, they get 2, and they have Tough Fighter. So that is really amazing. They can wipe out enemy units in one go, and they have a very long range because they are on horseback, so they can basically charge 18 inches, which is really, really good. But there are other units that are good as well. So fanatic veterans, like SS Fanatics from the Germans, or fanatic Japanese veterans, really good because they're strong. They have a lot of staying power. They only die on 5s in close combat, and to shooting as well. So that means that they typically stay for longer. Um, and at the same time, because they're fanatic, they will continue to hurt the enemy in multiple rounds of close combat. So fanatic veterans, really strong assault units. Inexperienced hordes are also surprisingly good, because they're so cheap and you have so many of them in your units typically. Um, that'll mean you pick up a lot of dice, and that's always good, right? You Because you pick up a lot of dice, then you remove a lot of the enemy. So right now I'm building my partisans, for instance, and for that army, um, pistoliero units, like huge groups of inexperienced men with pistols, giving them tough fighter. Um, 20-man units. That's 20 dice in close combat. All of them tough fighter. That maybe half of them hits, and maybe half of that hits again. So that's 15 kills in close combat. Who can match that? Not a lot. So inexperienced hordes, and even if you lose your inexperienced dudes, you're pretty likely, if you assaulted, you're pretty likely to hurt the enemy, right? So, and they were worth more than you because you're just an inexperienced unit, right? Cavalry is also surprisingly good in close combat because they get tough fighter, because they have long ranges of assault. Cavalry can be really good, but of course the Polish Lancers are by far the best cavalry, and please don't take Bulgarian, Romanian, Hungarian cavalry because they can't assault. Um, Tough fighter veterans, of course. You can even sometimes go regular. Some armies have a lot of regular tough fighters, like the French, for instance. They have the colonial troops, which are tough fighter. Um, and if you get tough fighter on inexperienced units, very good. Like I talked about before, my partisans with pistols, very good. But tough fighters on veterans are also very, very strong. Quite often you're paying for it though. And that means that assault weapons can be good for assaulters. If you don't have tough fighter as a special rule, getting yourself SMGs or assault rifles, assault weapons, pistols even, can be really, really strong if you're intending to go into close combat. So, what shouldn't you charge? Well, there are certain things you should avoid charging, and that is units that have escape moves, so enemy cavalry, or there are other units, armored cars or whatever. Um, there's even some infantry units that can do a little bit of an escape move. Um, they're typically not worth it because they can escape out of line of sight or out of your range, where they can sort of pull you into kill zones where the enemy can just shoot you down, and that is not good. Other assault troops are also typically bad targets because they'll typically have tough fighter, and if you don't outright win the first round of combat, you're in a pretty difficult position where you're very likely to lose at least some of your very expensive assaulters. Veterans in defended obstacles are the worst ever. Like veterans in area terrain, you're never going to get them out. Because they're so survivable, they might win that close combat. Even dedicated assault units like Polish Lancers or Gurkhas or Japanese veterans, they will struggle against veterans in defended obstacles. They're really likely to fight back and to hurt you in, in a bad way. Also, be very wary of flamethrowers, because if the flamethrower has not yet acted, he can actually shoot as you're charging in, unless you're inside of 6 inches, and then you're pretty much in his range anyway. Which means that you run straight into that flamethrower with the tests for morale to see if you go away. That is also pretty likely to lose you an assault unit. Same is true of Daka tanks, like the Steward or the Polizei tank. Both of them are at a level where if they can see you, and if you charge them, you're pretty likely to get messed up on that way in, because they can deliver so many machine gun shots. Um, and the same is true of units that are on ambush. Um, don't don't run towards an ambush if you can avoid it. At least there are ways to get around that, but most of the time you should just leave ambushes alone. So these are also some of the things that can defend against assaults, of course. By the way, I also have a whole video on how to defend against assaults. The link is in the comment or the description. Good targets, though. Small teams, very good targets, because they're very unlikely to hurt you on the way in, and very unlikely to hurt you in close combat. Artillery as well, very unlikely to do anything, especially if you can charge them where they can't shoot at you as you're charging in. Very good. Transports like soft-skinned vehicles and open-top vehicles are really, really good. And if they're transporting something, that is even better, because that whatever they're transporting will have to get out, will have to fight you, and they're very, very likely to lose the unit that they're transporting, and then the transport, because of course transport units, they die if you're closest to them. Be wary though, because they might try to draw you into a kill zone, because they have to disembark the transport in order to get out to defend it. So transport, soft-skinned and open-topped, also really good. Inexperienced units also, especially if they're like of an equal-ish size as you, they are a really good target for assaulters, because they're very likely to die to your assault, especially if you hit first, right? And regulars of lesser numbers than yourself. Most of the time, don't fight veterans in close combat. They need shooting and not close combat. Right. So why would you charge, and why would you decide not to charge? Well, for me, when I choose to charge, it is to be decisive. It is to be that's what I think charging and close combat does for bold actions, because most of the shooting is not really decisive. It's not where you actually kill enemy units, where you break the morale or whatever. Mostly shooting will deliver pins, maybe a few casualties, but close combats are really decisive. This is where you take out that one unit completely, remove it from the game. So I use charges when I feel like they can do that for me, when I feel like they can be decisive, and I want that decisiveness to win the game for me, right? Remember also that they give you a little bit of extra movement. So chargers are really mobile, especially of course cavalry, because they get extra movement when they consolidate. And you can use that to your advantage. That extra bit of movement can be really good for you, because that will mean you can sort of loop around and get ready for the next charge. You don't have to be in an awkward position where you just kill the unit. You can push, or you can go back into cover. It completely removes enemy units, which is always good. Picking out enemy dice that will tip the dice in your favor in the bag, that will tip the game in your favor, because the enemy will lose assets. So that is always good, and there's a psychological effect to that. Once you start taking away the enemy's tools, his toys, and his soldiers, once you start pulling them off, many players start to panic a little bit. Some players will even, you can see it in their like posture. You can see how their shoulders will sag all of a sudden. They know that they are losing, because you just removed their whole key unit that was on that objective. And that emotional response is good for you, and very bad for the person having it. So that's all the good bits. Now the bad bits are, with assaulters you will take losses. It's inevitable. Either from defensive fire, from ambushes, just from not winning the combat outright in the first turn, you will take losses, which means that you need to design your assault units with that in mind. That's just the name of the game. It's not for free to assault. Close combat is dicey at best. It's always hit or miss, and if you miss, then it's really, really bad. So please don't take close combats that you can't win, that you're not absolutely certain that you can win, because it gets really dicey and it gets really swingy. Whereas shooting doesn't really. Most of the time you can count on a few pins or a few casualties, right? Close combat, you can win big or lose big. I've had a whole unit of Gurkhas lose to a medium mortar, lose the close combat, and just all of them die. That's what happens. Sometimes your dice just grow cold, and that is the name of the game with assaulting. Not so, at least not so much with just shooting. Now, good ways to place your assaulters. I've tried to illustrate here. Um, there are a few things that you need to learn when you're playing assault units. The first one is snaking. So building that long conga line of troops, that will give you a large footprint on the table. That large footprint is really good for assaulters. Not necessarily so for shooting units, but for assaulters, that means that you have a lot of space where you are a threat, right? The more space you have, the better it actually is for assaulters. So assaulters don't clump up. They shouldn't. They should spread out. And typically, so this is what I've shown you here. This is the spread, this the snaking, the conga lining, whatever you call it. Typically, you'll want to spread out behind buildings. So this is an illustration. Let's call this a house, right? The black box here. And I will peek out one guy here and one guy here that can sort of see out. And they will be my closest to enemy model dude, the guy I measure from. Because that one guy peeking out, yes, he's in the open, but the rest of my unit is in hard cover. So I'll get hard cover. Um, so that is a key skill of finding out how you can place your assaulters in a conga line so that they have hard cover and at the same time that they are looking towards stuff that they want to charge. There is one, and this is a cheeky tactic, but it is actually what the rules say. And I know that there are people who disagree. You can disagree all you want. Show me where in the rules that this is not so. You can do a split unit. So, do I have something to illustrate with? Yes, I do. Just a sec, I'll be back. Right, I have a piece of linear obstacle, a wall here. I have one of my Cossacks here. So, most of the time, if you have an assault unit and you stand behind a wall and you want to attack something over there, right? You're crossing that wall. You're crossing the wall, which means that you're crossing a linear obstacle. Don't do that. Place one or two of your unit on the other side of the wall. Make sure that that one person, that one soldier, is closest to the enemy models, because now you're not in area terrain, which means that your unit can move a full run move. A full run move. And it's only that model that gets to measure. The other models don't count. Read the assault rules. The other models do not count. So you can move 18 inches with cavalry, 12 inches with infantry, and just pull the rest of your unit over that linear obstacle. That is an amazing little exploit. I wouldn't do it at friendly games, at least not until I've told my opponent what I'm doing. But in tournament games, I do it all the time, because you only move at an advanced rate if your unit has to do that. You don't, because you're only measuring closest to closest. That is the measure that counts. The rest of your unit could potentially move 12 inches. I mean, right, I have a linear obstacle, right, here. I can move 12 inches along each side. Even though my unit is split, I can move along as long as I'm not crossing. So a regular run, I can do that. Which means that my unit's move is 12 inches, or 18 inches for cavalry. So having one guy on the other side means that I can still charge at a run rate. That is the unit split by a linear cover. and that is a key tactic for assaulters. It is really good because it gives you hard cover, and at the same time makes sure that you can reach your intended target. Other tips and tricks that I have: avoid area terrain if you can. It will slow you down, and if the enemy is in area terrain that you want to charge, that will also slow you down and give them simultaneous combat. Don't do it. Don't go near area terrain. Area terrain, you need other assets to clear that out. Avoid simultaneous combat with veterans. Always, always, always. I've said this multiple times by now. And if you have to charge someone who can shoot at you, like ambushers or people who have defensive fire, then at least give them a pin first. So have another asset that shoots at them, gives them a pin. Now they're shooting at minus at you once you charge. That is a really good thing for you because, of course, you already have hard cover, right? Because you listen to my tips and tricks and placement rules for assaulters, so you have hard cover. And now they also have a pin. That means that they're shooting at -3. Always pick fights you can win. Pick fights with opponents that are weaker than yourself, because it will be decisive. You'll take dice from the opponent, and it won't be so dicey. And only pick fights you need to win. So don't charge all the time because you can. Charge when you think this could be key. If I remove that unit, then it's really good for me. I will take that. I will take that. I think maybe math says that I should win that fight, so it's a fight that I can win, and at the same time, if I remove that unit, I have the objectives. I will win the game. That is a fight I need to take as well. Can and need. Always consolidate for advantage. So once you've had your fight, you won your fight, look, where do you need to go? Where would be beneficial for you? Do you need to go further up in order to set up a next assault? Do you need to go back into cover? Figure that out and try to do that. Remember the peeking. Always do that. Always have your assault units peeking out. If they can't see the enemy, they can't charge. They're not worth anything. So you need to have at least 1 or 2 models peeking out. It's good for you. Do that. Now, whether or not to go first or go last, that depends. In some close combats, you'll really want to go first, because removing that one asset, like if you're straight up against an engineer unit, you of course want to go first because you want to make sure that he doesn't get the flamethrower off in your face, right? So there are some turns where you want your assaulters to charge as the very first dice you pick out. But there are also some turns where you want to set up your charge. So you know where you're going, but they're on ambush or whatever. So you need a lot of other stuff to do stuff first, and you know that your charges are going to be in the open once you've done that. So there are certain advantages to going first and going last with this. But typically I won't be charging in the middle of the turn. I'll be charging either last in the like in the end game of the turn or in the start of the turn. Not so much in the middle, typically. And that was it. Thank you so much for joining me for this rookie tutorial. I hope you got something from it. Let me know in the comments what you think. I will see you next time. Cheers.